Hey guys, welcome to Best Movie Recap. Today I am going to explain a 1996 American action movie called The Rock. Warning. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. Today's movie starts with the General Francis Hummel sitting home and remembering the last call from his soldiers who were left to death behind the enemy lines. The scene changed to a rainy morning at Arlington National Cemetery, where General Hummel visits the grave of his wife, who had recently passed away. He tells her that he misses her so much and there is something he has to do now, something he couldn't do when she was still alive. He hopes that wherever she is, she understands why he is doing this. After saying a final goodbye, he places his Medal of Honor on the headstone and kisses it before he leaves. Later on that night, Hummel leads a group of rogue force reconnaissance Marines on a raid of a naval weapons depot in order to steal a stockpile of 16 missiles loaded with the VX gas. The general entered the depot with his car claiming that he is here with a security inspection team, while Major Tom Baxter and the other members sneak from the other side after taking down all the guards using narcotics shots. During the operation, one of their men had a horrific death caused by an accidental release of the VX gas when one of the canisters was dropped and a sphere containing the deadly substance shatters. The man's skin begins to dissolve, he convulses and chokes to death. Hummel and his second-in-command, Major Tom Baxter, have no choice but to leave the room sealed with their man inside. Then they upload the 15 rocket with the VX gas and left the Naval Weapons Depot. In an FBI lab in Washington, D.C., Dr. Stanley Goodspeed is called in to inspect a package sent to Bosnian refugees. He and a trainee named Marv Isherwood find a small doll inside that sprays them with sarin gas and contains a bomb made of C4 explosive that could destroy the lab and kill everyone in the building. As Stanley works frantically to disarm the bomb, he turns down a hypodermic needle loaded with a dose of atropine. Then he manages to disarm the bomb successfully. At home that night, Stanley was relaxing until his girlfriend, Carla, arrives home. He tells her about his experience and mentions that, because the world is so cruel and violent, anyone considering having children is being foolish. But Carla tells him she's pregnant. Stanley is stunned, then tells her that he is so happy. Carla then asks him to marry her and he accepts. On the other side, a group of tourists including General Hummel and Major Tom were on a tour in the Rock prison. Hummel saw a group of students. He approached a girl, then tell her to find her teacher and asked him to take them back home. Meanwhile, two soldiers subdue the guards with guns, while the tour guide offers the tourist to try the cells. When they get in, he got surprised by Hummel, who tells him that the tour is over. Then they put him with the other tourist. After taking control of the island, two helicopters arrived with more soldiers including Captains Fry and Arrow, who organized the raid on the weapons depot. Hummel chose a room to use as his base of operation. After that they set the rocket in different places on the island and installed an anti-motion trembler device in the shower room. This device can sense any small movement. Going back to the operation base, Hummel introduces Captain Fry, Captain Darrow, and their men to the crew, which consists of him, Major Baxter, Captain Hendricks, and Gunnery Sergeant Crisp, whom they all work together in the Operation Desert Storm. After that, he tells them all why he is doing this and the price they will have to pay if they fail. Then he called the FBI director Womack to inform him that he have 81 tourists hostage and 15 VX gas rockets ready to strike the population of San Francisco. Then he tell him to wait for another call in 1 hour and cut. Womack held an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. During the meeting, Sinclair was reading Hummel's file, where he revealed that the General Hummel had 3 tours in Vietnam, Panama, Grenada, and the Desert Storm. He also has 3 Purple Hearts and 2 Silver Stars plus a Congressional Medal of Honor. At this moment, Hummel call and start talking to AI Kramer, who knows him for a long time. Kramer asked Hummel why he is doing this. Hummel said that 83 Force Reconnaissance Marines have died under his various commands, 47 in northern Laos and southern China, before finishing what he was saying. Sinclair interrupted him saying, "We have never sent troops into China." But Hummel gets angry and asked him to identify himself and his age. Then he said, "You have probably got no idea what I'm talking about. Because by your 9th birthday, I was running Black Ops into China." After that, he asked him to remain silent. And continue what he was saying earlier, it turns out that during the Operation Desert Storm, 20 of his men were left to rot outside after the conflict ended. And no benefits were paid to their families, no medals were conferred, also they didn't even given a military burial, knowing that these men died for their country, and for him this situation is unacceptable. Hummel orders them to transfer him $100 million. He will give $1 million to each of the 83 Marines' families, and the rest will disperse at his discretion. Before ending the call, Hummel gives them 40 hours to transfer the money, otherwise he will strike San Francisco with the VX gas. After that, General Peterson revealed that the potential casualty rate for a single rocket armed with VX poison gas is 70,000 dead, and the only way to stop the VX gas is by using the thermite plasma, which is still in the test phase. Then they all agree to send the SEAL Ground Commander Anderson and the best chemical biological Stanley Goodspeed to save the hostages, also stop Hummel and his men before launching the rockets. Goodspeed receives a call from Womack telling him to report to San Francisco. His future wife wasn't happy, but he assures her that it is probably just a training exercise and they can be married there when it is finished. Going back to the meeting, Womack and the other conclude that the only way to get into the rock prison is by using the tunnels under it, but it is impossible because the former warden is already dead and the guards know nothing. One of them suggests an ex-prisoner later revealed to be John Mason, but Womack refuses, saying he is dangerous and he may escape again, but then accept knowing that Mason is old now. When Goodspeed arrives, James Womack informs him of the situation, and Goodspeed agrees. Then they both meet Ernest Paxton, the agent in charge of the West Coast operation. In the way, Womack tells them that John Mason is a federal prisoner and the only former inmate of Alcatraz who ever successfully escaped. The only thing they need from him is the way he took it to escape from Alcatraz. Paxton said, "Since you know him, why don't you question him?" But Womack refuses because there is a considerable amount of blood between them. Paxton tries his luck with Mason, but he couldn't agree with him. Then he throws him a coin and said, "Use it to call your lawyer, because you are going back to jail." After that, they sent Stanley, who was very kind to Mason, and managed to convince him to help them for a pardon. However, shortly after he signs his pardon, Womack tears it up. Goodspeed notes that while they were talking to Mason, he mentioned the names of several historical figures who were wrongfully imprisoned, like Nelson Mandela, Sir Walter Raleigh, and Archimedes. Womack brushes it off, accusing Goodspeed of asking too many questions. Meanwhile, Mason frees himself and uses the coin to break the glass to find Womack on the other side. Part of Mason's agreement includes a short stay at a luxury suite at San Francisco's Fairmont Hotel. He calls in a large amount of food to distract his minders. Out on the suite's balcony, while shaking Womack's hand on the deal, Mason slips a rope around Womack's wrist and throws him over the side, holding the rope. Then he escapes, while Goodspeed calls the other agents to help him pull Womack to safety. Mason steals a Humvee from a hotel patron, and a very dramatic car chasing followed, where he drives recklessly through San Francisco, colliding with cars and other obstacles to block their pursuit. Stanley asks help from his friends to find out if Mason has any family in San Francisco, and gives him the address of Mason's daughter. After following her, he finds Mason, who finally makes it to the Palace of Fine Arts and meets with his daughter. The two seem to reconcile, Jade being bitter after her mother's death and Mason's abandonment. Then Goodspeed shows up and tells Jade that her father is working with him in the FBI team. Upon their return, Goodspeed learns that he himself will accompany Mason and the incursion team to Alcatraz. Despite his minimal combat training and fear of deep water, Paxton appeases him by having his men get Carla to safety. With Mason's guidance, the SEAL incursion team successfully infiltrates to Alcatraz. Then Mason took his way through a dangerous path between the fire and opened the door for the others.
Welcome to the Rock.
As they work their way through the tunnels and enter the shower room, their presence is discovered by sophisticated warning equipment set up by Hummel's men. Hummel tries to convince Anderson to surrender, but he refused. During the conversation, one of the soldiers drops a small rock and Anderson's soldier starts shooting. Then Fry and Darrow open fire, leaving only Mason and Goodspeed alive, who were still under the shower room. Mason decides to leave the island, but Goodspeed reveals the true purpose of the mission. and convince him to stay to protect his daughter's life. They begin the process of seeking out and disabling the 15 rockets one by one, traveling through the underground catacombs to avoid detection. They find them in the morgue, and Goodspeed begins the painstaking process of removing the guidance chip from each missile. With the VX spheres arranged in a delicate configuration, the work is slow and precise. While he removes the chips, he explains to Mason the effects of the VX gas on the human body. After 12 rockets are sabotaged by Goodspeed and Mason, Captain Hendricks is ordered to take a fire team down to the catacombs, resulting in a pitched battle in which Goodspeed uses lethal force for the first time. After learning that Hendricks' squad has been killed, Hummel threatens to execute one of the hostages unless the guidance chips of the sabotaged rockets are returned to him. Goodspeed grapples with the idea of surrendering the chips for a few moments until Mason destroys the chips, then surrenders to Hummel to buy time for Goodspeed to disable more rockets. During a tense confrontation in the prison courtyard, Mason insinuates that Hummel is actually insulting the memory of his fallen soldiers by threatening innocent civilians, and tests the general's resolve by calling him an idiot and denouncing his sense of patriotism as a virtue of the vicious. Hummel angrily strikes Mason and prepares to shoot him in the head, but instead orders to lock him up. Goodspeed manages to disable the 13th rocket just before he is captured. Meanwhile, realizing that the SEAL team is lost, the Pentagon readies a backup plan, an attack by armed F-18s that will neutralize the poison gas by releasing thermite plasma bombs, which would also kill everyone on the island. Paxton confronts Womack, asserting that given the severity of the situation, he has earned the right to know why Mason was imprisoned and why Womack hates him so much. Womack reveals that Mason was a captain for the British SAS who stole microfilm containing serious secrets about the US and other world leaders and events. The information came from the personal files of former FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. Mason was captured at the Canadian border and refused to divulge the location of the microfilm. After being disavowed by the SAS, he was kept locked up without the benefit of trial and told he would not be released until he gave up the microfilm. After Hoover died, the agency changed, but Mason remained locked away and forgotten. Mason is imparting this same information to Goodspeed as he fashions the bedding of his cell into a knotted rope with a wheelcaster tied to the end for weight. He explains that the government had no intention of ever letting him go, and if he has given up the microfilm, they would have simply killed him, making his death look like suicide. Goodspeed furiously asks how he managed to get out of the cell in the first place. An annoyed Mason ignores the question, simply throwing the rope until it finally hits a security switch that unlocks their cell doors. Once they have safely made it to the beach, Mason again decides to leave the island, convinced that Hummel is only bluffing. Goodspeed insists that the military will need more than Mason's assumption to call off the airstrike, and he will finish the mission alone if he has to. Goodspeed is captured before he can find another rocket, but he's rescued by Mason, who decided to come back. He did not want to see Stanley's child grow up without a father, as Jade has. The deadline Hummel gave to the FBI arrives, and when they didn't receive the money, Major Baxter demands he take action. Hummel orders a rocket fire. It's headed for a full stadium at Candlestick Park, but Hummel slyly enters revised coordinates on his computer keyboard and redirects the rocket so that it falls into the ocean. The surviving officers are furious, as Washington will now believe they are weak and incompetent and hit them with everything they've got. Hummel tells them that the whole operation was a bluff that the government didn't fall for, and since he's a professional soldier, not a murderer, it's all over. He tells his men to take some hostages and leave. He will surrender and take the heat for it all. Fry and Darrow refuse. They consider themselves mercenaries working for pay, and they want their money or to make good on the threats. A standoff ensues, and Mason and Goodspeed arrive just in time to witness its conclusion. As shots are fired, General Hummel and Major Baxter are fatally wounded. As Mason opens fire on the mutineers, forcing them to disperse, a dying Hummel tells Goodspeed that the last rocket is in the lower lighthouse. Goodspeed heads to the lighthouse, while Mason covers him from the rooftops. As Goodspeed disarms the last rocket, Darrow corners him, menacing him with a combat knife. Goodspeed launches the now unarmed rocket, which hits Darrow squarely in the chest, causing him to plummet to his death. As Goodspeed is handling the final string of green VX spheres, one of them drops on the deck. He catches it before it can shatter. Fry attacks him, chasing him through the lighthouse. Deciding to take a stand against Fry, Goodspeed lures him with the last guidance chip and attacks him. With the thermite plasma armed jets approaching, Fry overpowers Goodspeed and tries to strangle him. Out of options, Goodspeed shoves the loose sphere into the captain's mouth and hits him in the jaw, crushing the vial and releasing the contents. Captain Fry dies almost instantly, violently convulsing as his flesh melts away. Goodspeed is also exposed to the toxin, and he immediately stumbles away, pulling the atropine antidote from his boot and injecting himself in the heart with it. He is then able to grab and light 2 green flares, the prearranged signal that the threat is over. The flares are spotted from land, but only after one of the jet pilots has released his bombs, exploding on the rear of the island, missing all the hostages and sending Goodspeed flying into the bay. Mason reappears and drags the unconscious Goodspeed to shore. Paxton calls on the radio and learns from Goodspeed that all the hostages are still alive, but that Mason had been killed. The distraction provides Mason time to escape before the FBI arrives, telling him that Womack tore up his pardon. Mason suggests that Goodspeed take his honeymoon with Carla by way of Fort Walton, Kansas, giving him a slip of paper saying front pew. When Paxton and Womack arrive, Goodspeed tells them that Mason was vaporized by the thermite plasma missile. In the final scene of the movie, Goodspeed show up running from a church in Fort Walton, Kansas, as Carla urges him to hurry and get in the car so they can get away. Goodspeed has in his hand a canister containing microfilm. He looks at the microfilm and asks Carla if she'd like to know who really shot JFK. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, put a like and share it. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more. Have a great day.